get into it. From the mundane to the magnificent.
Yes, this is okay, to start out, like, this book, I heard about it a while ago now, I down the rabbit hole. I found it on a Reddit post that was a podcast that was like a expired subscription of this podcast called Mysterious Universe, and it was like from 2015 or something, and they reviewed this book, and it was kind of hard to listen to. Figured out how to listen to it, and then it's a hard to get book. There's not that many copies of it left. There's either one that costs like $150 or there's the $15 book that we found, but the versions were very bizarre and weird. So it's this by this lady named Vera Stanley Adler. The cheaper version of the one we got on Amazon, which we'll link to the bottom. It looks like this. Anyway, it's an awesome book.
It is an awesome book, and she's a previous writer. Like, she's an author of other books. So
like Finding the Third Eye, which I also read. This is much better though.
And that was her original one before she had these experiences.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, I guess, like, to preface it, she's dead, or she died like in the 80s, in her 80s, when she was in her 80s. So this is like this story is about when she was I guess in her 30s. She was in during World War II. She's English. She had to go to her family's farm in the countryside to escape like the bombing of London and all that. And she had, in 1938, she had written this book about finding the third eye, and she had all this academic knowledge about like esoteric spiritual type stuff. And she had nothing firsthand, and she was just going through like an existential crisis of like, what does all this mean or whatever. And so she had some mystical experiences, and that's what this book is about. So
yes, so we're going to talk about the book and break it into two sections, or two video and podcasts, and we're going to do the first half of the book right now. Just get into it. Definitely pick up yourself a copy, but we'll be referring to it throughout this video.
Yes.
What happened? How did she get into this? So you just mentioned a little bit. She was in it's starting World War II. She had to get out of London. She went to her family's farm in the countryside, and she was pretty much there with an aunt or a relative.
Yeah, in this cousin named Marion, who's like super muggle, boring.
Right. And like listens to the news and listens to radio shows and pretty much what's happening with the war.
Yeah, and whenever she suggests anything, she'll just be like, "Oh, honey, maybe you should go to church." Or
right. Yeah, she must be a character kind of, and she doesn't really leave her room too much. But anyway, they live on this 4-acre piece of property, and Vera's in charge of taking care of the property, and then she's taken it upon herself to get into the gardening. There was a previous gardener. She had no previous knowledge of gardening, and she just kind of got into it. So a lot of the book is about her experience with the gardening and taking care of the property.
Which for me, that's the mundane. So the book's called The Mundane to the Magnificent. So it's like alternating every other chapter. And yeah, when it goes to the mundane, I like a glaze comes over my eyes, and I'm like, skip that page.
Yeah, I can see why you say that, because the magnificent part is so wow. It blows your mind, which we'll obviously get into. But like, I was thinking about that too. But the whole mundane thing is, it's her regular gardening. She had this experience with Raphael, this spirit that came to visit her while she was sleeping, and that's the whole magnificent part, which we'll get into. But the mundane part is her doing these everyday chores.
She has a rabbit named Ben.
She got this rabbit, right? And the rabbit comes with her doing these chores. And there's the bombing. She's kind of like right over the line of where
the routes where they would fly over.
Yeah, like the bombers would fly. They wouldn't. So she'd hear bombing all the time, and so there was all this like these thoughts in her mind. And so as she's doing her regular gardening, she's thinking like, what is this all about? Like, and she starts really contemplating everything, her experience that she's had, and why, what's the purpose of life? Why am I in all this? And I feel like that's us. We experience that every day. So that mundane is like, that's what we all live with. That's our life. That's our life, is like getting our hands in the dirt and just, okay, I have to do this. But she did it joyfully. She enjoyed her gardening a lot.
Well, so this is interesting because her existential crisis when she's going through all this is like, she had questions, all these questions, like, why was there this horrific war? Why even war? Why even without war was there so much poverty, so much illness, so much ineptitude? Why was it such slow automatic thinking? Why such preoccupation with the mundane ways? Like, surely there were remedies, solutions to these urgent troubles. Why did no one want to think about this? So those were like the questions that she was like going through and asking herself. And it got to a point where she's been out in the garden for like, it seems like a couple of months. She's isolated with her cousin at this point. She's just like, she got to one night, she was like, I am so tired of knowing nothing real, nothing helpful. I need personal knowledge, not secondhand. That's what is the matter with me. I feel starved. I feel filled up with theory, but devoid of fact. And so she starts crying, and she goes into her room, and she's like crying like she's never cried before, like sobbing like a little kid, and just like begging to know more. And then like she's doing a version of a prayer, just praying to the universe, like to show her more. And all of a sudden this dude pops up in her room, and she's not scared because like, I guess she asked for it, right? And it's a man in her room. And she's like, his name's Raphael, and he's like, he introduces himself as Raphael. And she's like, okay. And then what do you want to know? And she's just like, so he's like, you want to know Verity? And Verity's like a name she used from her childhood. And she's like, she stopped crying, and she's like, yes. He's like, well, what exactly do you want to know? And then like she considers it, and she's like, well, I want to know those things that most intelligent people do not know. And he's like, which things? Like, he wants her to be very specific. And she's like, the world is a mess, isn't it? And she's like, that must be because of things which people do not know, like radical things which make them act differently. And he's like, well, why do you want to know these such things? In order to help them, of course. Yes. He's like, okay, well, why else should I want to know? She wants to know. Some people want to know for personal possession, he's saying. And she's like, without using it to help, that would be wrong. Like, so I guess that passes the test. Like, that's why he's kind of like, all right, well, she's wanting it for the greater good. She's not just wanting it for personal.
Yes, she always goes back to that throughout the whole thing. Like, but how is this helping anybody? How is this is great, but how is this actually,
what's this going to do for humanity?
For other people? How am I going to help people? So she kept going back to that, even when she was having the mundane experience. Like, okay, but what am I going to do with this? This is so interesting, all this knowledge, but how am I applying this? What am I doing?
And he even says, you're asking for a great privilege. Do you realize that the truth is dangerous, or that if I told you the whole truth, you are not ready or able to grasp it? You have not even the brain cells could accept truth like most people have. Therefore, I'll translate for you or whatever. So then it's like, it gets super interesting. So he comes to her a series of, I think, 7 times. Mm-hmm. And so this is her first experience with him. And it seems like he comes on the full moon.
Yes.
Anyway, so he says to her, okay, well, like lesson 1 is, he's like, okay, lay down. We're going to leave your body. Are you okay? Are you comfortable with leaving your body? And she's like, yeah, I guess so. And so he gives her an out of body experience for the first go.
Right. He helps her get out, and she winds up in her bedroom looking at herself sleeping, seemingly unconscious. And she starts having her experience in the etheric world. And then he asked her if she wants to go outside, and she felt like she was limited by the top of her roof or the ceiling. But then she realized that actually her aura was already outside of it, and that she could just move through it. And he was like, you could just, go through it. So he was started to explain to her all the different perceptions, and he would change her vision to see things differently.
Yeah. So and it's kind of like explained in that there's three parts to the world, or to like there's the physical world, which is the only thing we can personally see right now. Even though he does say that some humans with like clairaudience or clairvoyance can see almost like X-ray vision. And then there's the etheric, which is kind of, I would say, like the energy force of the universe. And then there's the astral, which is like the aura, like other other internal workings that go on. So those are the three those are the three realms or aspects that you can view in or whatever. So he basically is taking into her astral body, which is the dreamland in a way. But she's not technically dreaming. Her consciousness stays with him throughout these things or whatever. But yeah, so so the first thing he also shows her, she's like looking at her body like in an X-ray vision. She starts seeing all of like her veins and her internal organs and all that. Then he kind of shows her like how the etheric, how the energy system works, and she's seeing this webbing of electricity, and she starts seeing that there's a thread that connects her body to her astral consciousness, and that it can extend as far out as it needs to go, and she can it sends her information from her physical body to her astral body, and then she can physically be pulled back instantly with the thread to the body. And when I thought this was interesting when when he takes her and she's out like looking at the countryside, he takes her kind of far up. She sees this part where the electric grid webbing is like void, and she's like, "What's that?" And he's like, "Oh, that was like a bomb crater."
You know what I thought was also interesting is that he also had that thread. So I got why she had that thread, but I wasn't sure. I didn't really.
Okay, so that's the big mystery. That's another big mystery of the book, because like you sort of assume he's kind of like Father Christmas or some like etheric ghost character, but he also has I kind of think not, because later on in the book you realize that he even tells her in this that like our fate, like she's like, "Why are you showing me all this? Like why me?" And he's like, "Well, our fates are connected." And she's like, "Okay, well, she's like, she knows him from a past life, you find out, or from many past lives, but he is the same incarnation as he was like in this past life that was like, I don't know, a couple hundred years ago. And it seems as though like he did not die. He was able to keep that incarnation somehow. So I'm kind of thinking he's like a Merlin wizard man or something. Like I think I'm not saying he's immortal, but I'm thinking like this guy's a couple hundred years old, and he is like a big Gandalf character. He's like a white beard, old, kind of like he's Dumbledore.
Yeah, somebody that is lovable and kind and like stern at the same time, and thoughtful, and all encompassing, and able to do lots of magic, really.
Able to show her scales beyond compare.
Scales up and down.
So that's essentially this book is about. Like he takes her to the cosmos, and then he takes her inside a cell, and she even talks with the cell, and she sees it's about as above so below. Like the scales that he shows her are incredible. But so another observation that I thought was interesting at first was that when she's seeing her etheric body, he's like, "I don't like those those dark pieces of red." And she's like, "What do you like what do you mean? Why not?" And it's like the
dark.
Like apparently within your etheric body, your energetic body, ideally a perfect human or somebody who's done all their work, like their colors of their like chakra systems and everything become light and like all merge together and just become white, and they get a halo, and they're like, that's like, he said, that's physical, that actually was real, that's like how the saints used to look, that stuff was real, like people who really integrated themselves. But then other colors and emotions are linked, and that like at one point she sees like these dark yellow streaks in her, and he's like, that's fear.
That's fear. Yeah, and I also like the way he referenced colors later on, and he said colors are actually like the most important. Like if people who know colors pretty much have the key to wisdom.
he said colors hold great number of secrets and the key to wisdom.
So that was interesting. Like, I don't know.
Well, because
color therapy and all the chakras and the wow. it's just intense. You have to read if you haven't read the book, read the book and join the conversation.
It's awesome. It's amazing. Yeah. Okay. So then she comes back to her mundane life after she has her experience. And then but the second time is just the next night he comes to her. And this time he's like, are you ready for some perspective? And she's like, okay.
Right.
And so he makes her leave her body herself this time instead of him doing it for her.
Although he does help, she says.
Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah. Because she can't just leave it all the time. Anyway, so this time he shows her like the universe. He goes macro perspective. So he takes her
going out.
She sees the earth, she sees the solar system, and then she goes even past the solar system and she sees like, I guess what you would call like the Milky Way galaxy or whatever. And I guess if you think of this in terms of 1939, 1940, when she apparently is having these experiences, we haven't done that much. Like there's no Hubble telescope yet. Like there's limited astronomy stuff that we know. No man has been to space yet. So you always have to kind of keep that in mind too.
Right. Well, I was thinking as I read the book, I thought the same thing. But then I thought, well, now that you mentioned that it wasn't published until 1979, that makes me confused a little bit. But anyway, doesn't matter. Let's assume you really have to just take it from an open mind perspective. And I like one of the quotes that he said: "The seeker of the truth." Page 49. The seeker of the truth must learn two things. I changed it to she, even though it said he. Anyway, she must learn to believe that anything and everything is possible, and must never accept anything as the final truth. So I think that that's true about this book as well. Just like take it all. You be the critical thinker of it, but yeah. Well, anyway, if it was at that time, then there would only been limited knowledge about atoms, about the astronomy. Okay, yeah, but and also about the quantum field. Like that was all just starting.
Yeah. So she so then she gets back, and then she goes back into her mundane life after she goes to the cosmos, and she's well, first of all, she's starting to realize that, just like my body has this etheric web, so does the earth. So the earth is like a being just like I am, and then the solar system seems to have this etheric web just like the earth does. She's kind of like starting to put things together like that.
Yes.
So anyway, when she goes back to her mundane life, that boring little chapter is about how an army shows up to stay at their garden area, or like their farm. So like some military people they're hosting them. And a month later, Raphael comes back, and he's like, okay, well, like how do you feel now that you've had, you got to see like the macrocosm? And she's like, I feel insignificant. I feel like, like nothing, like my little petty problems don't mean anything, because we're a cell within a cell of a cell that's within a million cells, like,
right.
Yeah.
Totally.
She's like kind of, she says she feels like an
depressed.
Ambitious ant. It depressed her, I think. Yeah. And so he's like, okay, well, I'm going to give you a view from within. So he's like, since your body's asleep, we're going to go into like this. So they go into this army doctor who's staying in the another room beneath her. So he decides to shrink her. Yeah. And it's like, Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. Like they go into the foot of this doctor who's awake, and he's like at his desk, like doing some work or something. Yeah. And it's just that's such a cool chapter, how it goes down to
the cellular level.
Yeah. And he does tell her, like, remember, this is just the physical world. I'm not showing you anything else. Today is just a lesson in the physical. Right. So yeah. So anyway.
So then they get into cells, and he interprets what the cells are saying for her. So he
Yeah.
asks her if she has any questions to ask any of
So
these cells.
yeah, because she's like, okay, well, you can talk to a cell, and he's like, yeah, it's its own consciousness, it's its own entity. And so she's like, okay, well, I want to know its ambitions, and like where does it think its places in the scheme of everything. And then and actually, let me read to you what the cell says, because I thought that was pretty fascinating.
Yes.
So we ourselves always striving for something better. I'm quite an old cell, the parent of many who surround me. I have done my best to imbue my children with the highest ideas and the most worthy and devout habits. My ambition is to leave behind as fine a group as well-trained cells as I can, to carry on the work of evolution. I believe, of course, in our divine creator, in whom we live and move and have our being. We are all part of the body of this divine being whose mind and life is impossible for our tiny ones to visualize. He depends upon our discipline and well-being for his own well-being and development. If we worship him and obey his demands implicitly, we shall in time become initiated so that we shall eventually share in the wonders of his mind. And she's like, who are they talking about? Like, who is their God? And Raphael's like, yeah, Raphael's like, we can't ask them that, but it's the doctor. And he's like, okay. And then the cell goes on to say, like, she's kind of going like, all right, well, like, are you content being a cell? And he's like, oh, we as cells are striving for something better. So there is sometimes jealousy. Our creator sends us all that we need, yet some of us are too greedy or too lazy, and that upsets the balance of our community. And then disease and death appear. We are jealous of our rival communities. The cells of the liver are as foreigners to the cells of the heart, for instance. And although our creator is always trying to impress upon us that we are all one family, it doesn't make much difference. Cell nature doesn't change, We're always, there will always be strife. Sometimes supply and demands are unequal, or economical disturbances abound. We do not seem to learn the lesson of universal cell brotherhood. Sometimes we blame our creator for our troubles, and we feel that he sometimes blames us. The highest ambition of every cell is that after his death, he or she may be reincarnated to the cell community of the brain. Those are what we call the gray races, the most highly civilized of us all. Which is, that's an interesting concept.
Yeah, I mean, and it goes to show that at the cellular level, they believe in reincarnation. Also, that is also kind of interesting. Okay, and they know that they have that ambition of being a brain cell too. That's pretty amazing.
Yeah, and I just like that. That the cell even knows that that distribution isn't equal amongst all of their cells, and like and that you can get into that with well, actually we'll get into that a little bit later on, where it starts talking about how if you're an alcoholic, your liver is taking all the brunt of the work versus whatever.
Right, or if you don't eat well and the nutrients aren't being distributed properly.
Right.
Yeah, the cells.
So but he says, like, there's a lot to learn here, but we're not staying here. We got to go further. So they have to shrink even further with further. So they go within that cell, and then they go into even beyond, they go into the nucleus of the cell, and they shrink. And she starts to see that
there's a sun there.
The nucleus has a sun, and that there's all these electrons that are spinning around. And you adjust her vision even further, and like the smaller she gets, then it's just like, holy crap, man, this is it's a solar system. There's an actual sun, and there's like these little planets that are around, and they're all spinning around. And she starts to see like the chakra color system coming out of the sun of that, and she's literally at this point doesn't see the difference between when she was in outer space or when she's in the middle of the cell.
She's looking at like the same thing pretty much. She can't even tell the difference. Whew.
I know that's a cool concept. And then this is where he's like, and this is what he's like, this is the age old thing of as above, so below. And she's like, okay, well, but this is like literal. He's like, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And the nucleus, she gets into this when she's like, are we going to the nucleus? Are we going to the center?
Right.
When they get down to the atom,
And he's like,
about
no, the sun
sun.
is the heart of
Sun,
life. And he's like,
right.
it's the same as our sun, and it's too powerful for us to contact at present.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. That is so interesting. Like it's too even as our scientists suspect the extent of the deeper force still locked within the atom, it's even more complicated um, than what we think. And then it's like basically that's off limits to us still. We can't go into that. We can't go into the sun of the atom and the sun of our solar system were like off limits. It's beyond our understanding right now, or on our limits that we're not permitted to understand that part yet, or at least she wasn't at that time, right?
Right. Yeah. And that's in a, and I think at that point, she's just like, well, she's like, that's when she kind of is like, well, then like, she notices he's tired when they're in the nucleus, and she's like, oh dude, like, I'm sorry, like, like,
He's showing me around.
yeah, thanks for showing, like, why are you showing me around specifically? And that's where he's like,
Yes.
yeah, well, our fates are bound, so that, like, but we'll get into that later. You don't need to know more than that at this present time. And so
Yeah. Oh,
and
yeah.
that's where she does talk about the colors, and she's like, well, what is up with all this? Because she's kind of, it sounds like she's seeing chakra colors of these
Yes.
systems, and she's like, what are all these different color, like, because the sun has these threads connected to all the other planets, and they each have different designated colors that are,
Their own colors. Yes.
associated and go back to feed the stream of the sun as well. And she's like, what does this all mean? And he's like, well, basically that's secrets that,
Yeah, that are beyond
even
us.
yeah.
Yeah, and and the number 7. I liked how he said our solar system is based on the number 7. Don't forget that. And he does go back to the number 7
Right.
with the chakras later on and the planets. So it all
I thought that
in.
was interesting. That really
Yeah, it was like sacred geometry or whatever the number 7 is about. Yeah, and then she asks, am I actually responsible for all these lives inside of me? Because she realizes that there's like lives upon lives, the cells and these little things moving by. And then he answers, my friend, did you not create them? And like you created all of these things. Like you created this own universe, your body and everything that's within it. So kind of leaves her with that.
Yeah, and then she's like, everything has has purpose. Like, how do they all know what to do?
Oh yeah.
And I thought that was interesting. Actually, let me read that actually on page 75. Your observations are wise, my friend. So like, because she says, how do they all know what to do? So far, I have only shown you the outer physical coding of things, the expression and the effects of inner causes. One day you will see the inner causes of yourself. You shall see a world, a host of living beings, workings in all grades of sizes, who have each task of administrating and guiding and teaching physical creatures. Knowledge of them is veiled at this present, but it used to be expressed in folklore and myth. One day you will learn something of the numerous host of cherubs and seraphims and all the company of the heavens and the fairies and the undines. I don't know what that is. Gnomes and pixies. So that's pretty interesting.
The prelude to the next chapter, which starts about that too. Or he does take her in. I don't know if
after that. Well, first she goes back to boring life, and they get a wife for her bunny.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And that was cute. I like that. I was like, oh. Yeah, and yeah, I think it was an important point, like the bunny, the rabbit in the story, because she does refer to them like cats and dogs, and even my rabbit here is just Ben is just like going through his day, and then looks up and looks around and does like a crazy jump, and he's having these interactions with the fairies.
And like she doesn't realize that he's looking at the fairies until her
vision has changed and she's able to see all that. But I liked a couple of quotes. To be a god, and then I put goddess, one has to first know oneself as a god and then behave as one. I thought that was just like good advice to think like, You know, we all think that we're not creators, or like it's out of our control. And then it goes back to the whole thing of like, you're a creator, we're all creators, we're all gods at some level. But we have to act like that and believe it and act like one, whatever that means, I guess, for you. Yeah. And then Vera does ask the purpose of all this. She asks, you know, again, what's the purpose of all this?
She does kind of go back to, well, actually, let's go into the fairy thing, and then we'll talk about how she really wants to know the purpose. So then.
Oh, wait. Before we go to the fairy thing, are you about to go to the fairy?
No, yeah, I was. Go. What were you going to say before that?
Then she said, I learned that, you know, on our first journey, I learned that I was less than a speck of dust. And today you show me to myself as a God ruling millions and millions of lives. So it's just like, again, you know, as above as below, but it was just, okay, it took her out of her feeling of like, I'm just a speck and this all nothing, you know, I'm nothing, I'm of total unimportance. And then that's why he brought her down to the cellular level or to the subatomic level. And then she realized actually how much she was creating. It's pretty cool. Okay, yeah, fairies.
He comes again on the full moon, and then like he wants to know, okay, like, you know, upon what did you now you've been to the macro, you've been to the micro, like what do you think, you know? And she's just like, yeah, well, what's running it all? And it's like life is held from within form and activates through rotation. I thought that was interesting.
Yes, like movement.
And this time he says
like a disciplined motion, or like a special, like it was a specific motion. It wasn't just like a random motion.
Yeah, it is a spiraling, like the way planets move, a rotation. And then he's basically kind of is alluding to how scientists are trying to smash the atom, and how that's like that's basically destroying life, which is going to create karma.
Right. Yeah, I thought that was a good point out, especially during World War II.
Yeah. And this time he's like, okay, well, we're going to go back out into the solar system. So she leaves her physical body and she goes, and this time he's like, instead of just seeing the physical, which is kind of what he did the first time, this time she gets to see the astral and the etheric like coding of the solar system. So she's going like, okay, wait, there's the sun, and then there's the 7 planets with the light. She's like, okay, whoa. So are you telling me that the solar system's a being, like we live within the solar being, which is another like doctor basically? And he's like, yeah, basically I'm telling you it's a mighty being, and we're not permitted to see the whole of it. You're not going to be able to see what it looks like, but you can see like etherically and astrally what its chakra systems and everything look like.
Yes, and we were a solar system within another solar system, or within other solar systems.
Yeah,
crazy.
Yeah,
all the way up to the Dr. God, the creator, and outward. Wow. And
then I didn't quite understand this, but it was talking about how she's asking like, what's the 7, what are these 7 color, what is the 7 planet, like what's the significance of all that? And he's just like, known of many different names and lands. And he said, have you heard of the 7 spirits before the throne, ? Or the 7 archangels, or have you heard of all the company of heaven, or have you heard of cherubs and seraphims, or the forces of light and the forces of darkness? Do any of these terms mean anything to you? Nothing at all? ? She's like, yes, but they mean nothing to me. I'm like, no, I don't know. I mean, forces of light and dark, I guess.
Well, the archangels were for me, but I never heard of the 7 spirits before the throne.
Well, but even, I mean, I know there's archangels. I didn't know there were 7 of them.
No, I didn't know there were 7 of them. I guess now I do. But yeah, is it easier for you to believe that all the universe came into being and then continues to be run like clockwork without any active intelligence at work behind it? Because she said, like, yeah, but they're those terms. She said, yeah, I heard of them, but they're not actually real to us. Those are things that's like these stories or these mythologies or like things that we believe, but we don't really, they're not really like real to us. They just have to like kind of believe.
Yeah, but I mean, and he does make that good point where he's saying to her, he's like, well, like you don't control your breath, you're breathing anyway. Like you don't control your digestive system. It's working. Like you can thoughts, but that's like what you're in charge of. Like that's what your consciousness is in charge of. There's entire systems within your universe that are working
without you consciously
without
thinking
you
about
consciously doing anything to do them, and you wouldn't even know how to if you wanted to. You wouldn't know how to
Yeah.
make your cells reproduce and split.
Yeah. He said there are different organizations. I don't even know what to call them. I guess universes or solar systems within certain areas, within those systems that have that ability to run that. Those are conscious beings that are running those systems for us to run. It's amazing. It's like saying, I mean, it comes down to everything as consciousness.
Yeah.
And yeah.
And I did think this was, and she's just kind of like, well, how can something alive, when it seems to have no form, like these 7 colored forces or beings seem to be all mixed up now that they're all put together. And he's like, oh, my little one, you are accustomed to think in forms of bodies only in solid forms, but there is little, like, that is very materialistic. When you travel and you dream and you slip out of your solid form and you journey into the astral body, which is made of gaseous substance. But some seem quite real to you at the time. And as regards to the 7 colored spirits, their bodies are made of qualities and energies. And although they may lose their individuality, they constantly intermingle as they build the ideas that are expressed as the physical world. If you take a large soap bubble and you blow into it 7 puffs of smoke of different colors, they would appear to mix completely and lose their individuality. Yet, if you were small enough to enter into that bubble and separate color atoms of smoke, you would see quite distinguishable. And I thought that was a good point. I'm like, it's like your eyes are accustomed to watching the life at work within the form, but be patient, you will see a little better and well. Yeah, so I do think it is like, it is all a perspective too on how we
see things or can understand them.
So she talks about then he talks about devas. Like he goes and they go for a little bit further into Earth, and she sees these, I guess you would call them big elementals, or what do you think of devas are? I said like they kind of remind me of like elemental boss workers or something that work over Earth, like the DIVA.
Yeah, it was yeah, at first I was thinking it was like diva, DIVA, thinking, oh, okay, this is goddesses. Is that the same interpretation, like a diva? I don't know if it was or wasn't, but yeah, somebody that was like a god over that, or dominion, or yeah, maybe like a manager or some kind of boss.
It's a manager fairy. It's a giant manager fairy. Yeah, and then he goes into the fairy world, and basically he's like saying that even down to every cell has a fairy like that is in charge of it. There's tiny fairies all the way down to.
Well, yeah, the fairies who are in charge of the atoms. That is amazing too. Like everything. Everything you've seen was pretty much, especially in nature, has been touched by a fairy. Like pollination, not just bees and whatever, that insects that do pollination, but like these fairies that are really the ones who are controlling that, or that dominion. And they were also like the colors again came out with like, that was like the green. The fairies were in charge of like the green area, although they were able to, like, you could see like fuchsia or whatever color like the flower was around them, but they were like, green was their element.
Yeah, and then it talks about the sprites, which were like these, sounds like they're like little animal-sized fairies that are almost like to help animals learn how to play, which is also important.
Yes, I loved that. Yeah,
that was super cute. And then with all the fairy stuff, she said she gets frustrated, and she's like, okay, like, what is this for? This is cool and some stuff. That's great, and I'm glad there's fairies, but how's that going to help me? I don't want to seem ungrateful.
Yeah.
She's like, I don't want to seem ungrateful, but how is all of this, like seeing the cosmos and seeing the cell level and seeing all the fairies that run of it, how's that going to help me deal with the fact that we're in World War II and we have idiots all over the place running the thing?
Yeah, like, and how is it going to help me help others? Really, she's like, you still haven't answered my question. Like, how can I help others? Pretty much.
Yeah, and then at this point, he's kind of like, oh, okay, I'm not frustrated. I'm glad that you still have your focus. That's great, but you do have to learn how the world works before you have to know where you came from to know where you're going and how to fix it. So
yes.
that's where, and that's sort of like where we left off, and we'll pick up in the next point and go into more. But yeah, I also just thought it was such a cool concept of her really realizing that like everything's alive, even within living things is living things.
Yes. Yeah, it goes back to everything has a spirit. Everything is alive, has consciousness. How could you say that something doesn't have consciousness? Even, and then, yeah, if you really want to analyze it, you're like, okay, so I've got this plastic thing. Like, what does that mean, really? But okay, that's another level maybe. But, or something that's wood that came from a tree that was living, and now you have it in your room like it's a physical object. There are atoms inside of that. There's like, what's inside of that? Like, what does that mean exactly?
And I did find it interesting though that she talked about how when at the very beginning when they went by the moon, she's like the moon is dead and has no energy web.
Oh.
Yeah, because when she was comparing it to the earth and everything, there was no living energy on it. The moon's a dead thing.
Guess it's just the satellite.
Yeah, which is fine because I don't trust the moon anyway, but yeah.
Right. That just supports our other theories about the moon.
Oh yeah, we'll have to do a whole podcast on the moon one day.
We will. Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, it's all mind blowing, and it's just like mind expanding more than anything else. It's just it's helpful. Like the fact that he changed her vision, you know, because I felt like, well, yeah, I feel a lot like her. I can relate to Vera. You know, we have these questions. We lay awake at night and we want to see. We've heard other people having these experiences, but why not us? And then she has this experience, and she's put it in, and she's helped us by putting it into this book. But by doing that, we're able to expand our minds through this book, or through, I don't know, just being able to like she's helped us change our vision a little bit with
our
it.
perspective, right, for sure. I mean, and it's funny because I was talking to my older brother like when I first listened to this podcast a while ago, and I was like kind of trying to express to him that the planet is a being, the planet is alive, and he's like, the planet is not alive, Nikki. It's just a planet. It's just a rock. It's like I'm like, what do you mean? What do you mean it's not alive? And he's like, well, what do you mean it is alive? And I'm like it's an ever-changing structure. It has an atmosphere. It's this whole entire system. It has like a core that's like got heat that's self-radiating. It's got
we live off of it. It is
and he's just like, no, things live on it, but it's just a giant rock. It's like the planet itself is not a being. And I was like,
wow.
like, what are you writing? But I didn't realize that was such a far-fetched concept, but I think that is for some people. Like some people can't get even past the point that our planet is alive.
Right. Yeah, that's true. That's good. I feel like this I would put this on my on my list of must-read books that are like, I have, you know, a list of books that have changed my viewpoint, and this is definitely one of them. To the level, it's not like I didn't understand the as above below, and it was more conceptualized, but now it was helpful to see like the colors and the systems, and really helped me to think inside of each little thing and your connection to it, and that there's just the interconnectedness and the vastness and the whole you know, what is it called, eternity, like heaven has the mansion has 1 million, I don't know how, I forgot how it goes, like
rooms
that,
or whatever.
Yeah, like that's what we're in.
And this isn't even done. The book, like this is like the perspective setup, which is really amazing. But it gets even better where when it gets into what humans are in relation to Earth and all that. So
that is great. I didn't read the second half.
Okay, so well it's gonna be cool.
I wasn't able to, so I didn't have the whole perspective of the book, just doing this part. So yeah, I'm excited.
But that's good because, you know, whatever. And and there's stuff in it that you don't have any idea yet because they didn't even talk about it in the Mysterious Universe podcast. So it's cool.
Oh, great. Yeah, because I listened to that podcast. But yeah, I liked the way she ended. I thought it was an appropriate place to end too, because we got through right through the middle of the book, right? through the first half of it. And the
Yeah,
last
we finished
thing,
chapter 8. So we're starting on chapter 9 next time.
yes, starting on chapter 9. I'm very excited. So join us next time.
Yeah.
Anything
All right,
else?
guys.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks.